You're listening to the Fit Bottom Girls podcast, the only podcast for active, athletic, and adventurous women and those who aspire to be. We've got your back as you navigate the ups and the downs of motherhood, midlife, and menopause. I'm your host, Alison, here to remind you that female isn't fragile. I'm a strength, conditioning, and nutrition coach who's trained hundreds of women to achieve their goals to get fit, lift heavy, go the distance, and feel like a badass in every area of their lives. Each week, you'll hear from me and some of our awesome guests as we educate and empower you during each stage of your fitness journey, whether you're already crushing it, fighting to get back out there, or starting from day one. So friends, let's get into it. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Fit Bottom Girls podcast. Today, we're talking veggies. But wait, don't roll your eyes or skip ahead just yet, because this is not your typical just eat more kale lecture. With me on the show today is Jess Smith, cookbook author and veggie magician, who's here to help us actually enjoy eating more vegetables without becoming one of those people who spends their entire weekend meal prepping for the week ahead. If you've ever stared into your fridge at yet another wilted bag of spinach, wondered why you even bother buying broccoli, or felt like veggies are just a sad diet food, this conversation is going to change that. Jess is here to share some super doable tips to make veggies easier, more flavorful, and less likely to die a slow, soggy death in your crisper drawer. We talk about time-saving roasting pan magic, go-to sauces, plant-based protein, grocery store hacks, and how to keep your sanity and your fiber intake intact. So whether you're a veggie hater, a veggie hopeful, or someone who just wants to stop wasting food and make weeknight dinners easier, this one's for you. So let's get into it. Welcome, Jess. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Sure. Thanks so much for having me.
As a nutrition coach, I am a fan of simplifying nutrition. And to me, that really is about focusing on the basics, getting enough protein, eating enough fiber, fruits, veggies, whole grain, and limiting saturated fat. And one of the key struggles when I'm working with my clients on those things is, what do I do with the veggies? And they have all, and I think we've all done this thing where we commit to eating more veggies. So we go to the grocery store and we fill up our carts and then we bring them back, put them in the fridge, they go bad, we toss them in the trash. And so that is a common struggle that I've seen. And then also I feel like many of us have a complicated relationship with vegetables. Eating veggies or eating other quote unquote health foods can really come with a lot of baggage for those of us women who kind of came up with diet culture. And they can feel really like boring diet food, like the types of food that you eat when you hate how much you weigh and you hate how you look, and nothing about them is particularly beautiful or satisfying or delicious. And that just makes me so angry because veggies are not just a diet food. I hate that diet culture has kind of owned them for as long as it has. Veggies are such a key element of good nutrition and nourishment, and there are ways to prepare them and eat them that don't involve self-loathing or using them to diet up your diet. And that is why you're here, Jess. You have written a cookbook that reclaims veggies for health and satisfaction, and it's titled Start with a Vegetable. And it's for everyday busy home cooks, so not just for chefs and people who love to cook, but who want to eat more veggies, but also want to enjoy their food. So tell me a little bit first about why you wrote this book.
At the heart of it is becoming a parent. And similar to you, I came up as a child of the 80s in the Midwest, and we had every meal was a protein, a starch, and a vegetable served separately. And the vegetables were always the thing that it was like, eat one more bite of broccoli, eat one more. And they were often boiled. They were sometimes drenched in cheese sauce. They were like just this sort of thing that were on the plate that you had to eat. And so, then when I had kids, I have 3 daughters, and I started thinking to myself, that's not how I want us to approach vegetables. Like you said, I want these to be part of just a beautiful meal that we love and that tastes good. And so I really just started changing the way that I approached them in my own home. And it turned into this sort of concept that then became a book, which was just, let's think about the vegetable first and cook it in a way that is delicious and appealing to us, and then build the meal around that.
Yeah, I have flashbacks of the dinner table and the pile of meat over here, and then the potato of some sort, mashed or baked or whatever. And then in some bowl with a slotted spoon was the vegetable du jour. which were almost always a little bit overcooked and there was nothing really appealing. And they were usually like a single ingredient. Yeah, same. Grew up the same way. So preparing veggies, planning for veggies. I love in the book that you have broken it down based on the veggie. So if you are working with carrots, here's a whole bunch of recipes on carrots. Here are a bunch of recipes with broccoli. Here are a bunch of recipes with corn. And I love that because it simplifies the grocery shopping and the meal planning aspect of it and creating some cohesive meals across the week with doing less shopping, maybe even less prep. So what are some of the things that you have done or that people have done that they've gotten wrong with vegetables?
It begins with the grocery store and sort of haphazardly grabbing things and then
Yeah.
coming home and tucking them into our fridge and leaving them in the bag that we put them in at the grocery store and just shoving them in the back and then leaving them there with no plan. And I mean, I do it too. I really have to watch myself to take that produce out, to set it somewhere where I will see it in the fridge and where I will use it. And it's why I wanted to write this book and why I have sort of changed the way I approach recipes on my website and on Instagram, because I want us to look at that bell pepper in the fridge and say, it's time. This pepper has a day left where it will be still good, and I'm going to use it tonight in dinner.
Yeah.
And so when I wrote the book, that's what I mean, just like you said, I wanted this to be about everyday vegetables, not difficult to find vegetables. There's so many beautiful cookbooks that approach unique vegetables in a beautiful way. I wanted this to be about the vegetables that we grab at the grocery, the bag of broccoli florets that we grab because we know we should eat them, but we don't
Yep.
know what we're going to do with them.
Yep.
So yeah, it comes down to thinking about the way you put them in your fridge and making yourself walk into the kitchen at dinner time and take those out because you know they need to be used. Because otherwise they wilt in the back and we get that bag that's mushy baby
Ew.
spinach and we
Yeah.
just toss it.
Yeah. Yes. Waste is something that I hear over and over from my clients. I have the best of intentions. I go in, I look at what looks good in the grocery store and I grab them, I bring them home. But you're right, they don't have a plan. So, what is your approach to that? What is your approach to having that plan for what you're going to do with the vegetables?
I think one thing that we all have to do is be really realistic about what works for us. Some of us I am a person who on Sunday likes to plan my meals for the week. Do I always stick to it? No. I tell people over and over, a meal plan it's not a promise. It's something that can change, but I am the type of person who does that. Not everybody is. And so the one thing that I would say about going to the grocery store and not having a plan is getting some meals in your routine that you know you love and that you can kind of riff on. So we were talking earlier just about, before we jumped on the call, about like different sauces and flavors that people like. And if I don't have a plan, I will go into the grocery store and I will buy a bag of broccoli, a bag of cauliflower florets, and some chicken apple sausage. Because I know that if I come home and chop those up and stick them on a sheet pan, there are a whole bunch of different ways that we can use them. And that is one thing that I tried to include in the book was different ideas for using these prepared dishes, because I think that's the key is knowing like, okay, I don't have a plan for tonight, but I know that this is a format that I will enjoy and that I can turn into some other meals later if I want to.
Yeah, and I love that too because I'm not a sit down and figure out what I'm going to have during the week sort of person. I don't have that plan, but I do have a system, right?
Yeah.
And so when I go to the grocery store, it is some sort of green leafy base that I saute up. So that's usually like kale and spinach in a bag or something along those lines. And then there's some sort of like starchy veg. So maybe sweet potatoes or butternut squash or something that I can roast on the roasting pan and then just put in the fridge and pull from throughout the week. Cause then it goes into the pan with the veggies that I'm wilting and it heats them up and it crisps them back up so that they're warm and it doesn't take a lot of time. Cause I'm not a fan of vegetables going into the microwave. So the more that I can, just the texture change.
Yeah.
But if you throw them in the saute pan with the veggies that you're cooking, they crisp up again and they get warm and they don't taste like they've been put in the microwave. And then just using those sauce combinations, like having some go-to sauces that are shelf stable that stay in the cabinet. And then it's really easy to just take that system and not know specifically what I'm going to do with everything, but there are just some things that if I grab, I know I can do a lot with them.
Yeah.
And they just end up, in saute pans together because I'm a huge fan of like single pan meals or bowls, which is something that you have at the end of your book as well, where it's like you prepare the ingredients and almost like taco night every night because you just get to bring the ingredients out and make your own bowl full of whatever looks good or whatever seems good for that meal.
I love that. The bowls really were something that even in the earliest days of talking with my publisher about this book, I wanted these graphics. I wanted the bowls to be part of it because especially if you're feeding a household or you have guests over, it's so nice to set the ingredients out and do like a build your own
Yep.
bowl it means that you can put things out that you could have vegetarians at the table, and you could have meat eaters at the table, and you could have gluten-free options, and you could have, so there's just like an endless variety of things that you can do there.
Yeah.
And they can be really simple to
And if
prepare.
you're somebody who, like me, tends to get really sick if eating the same thing throughout the week, but with the bowls, what I found was you don't get as tired of it because you can use different combinations.
Yeah. It's exactly right. I'll go to Trader Joe's and get a couple of their, they have a green goddess sauce and they'll have a spicy sauce, and we'll get a couple of those and just keep them in the fridge, because I find that sometimes it's making the sauce that's just too much work on a weeknight. And so having a couple options, it's like you can change the whole dynamic of the bowl by just changing the sauce that you put on top. And it really does make it kind of a more fun, adds a little fun.
Yeah. So when it comes to veggies, you have some tips for people for minimizing waste. So walk me through what you suggest.
When I started thinking about the concept of this book, what I found was that in my own kitchen, the things that go bad are the vegetables.
Yeah.
We are a household that eats meat. If we have meat or fish or something in the fridge, I can always toss it in the freezer. Tofu, all those things can be frozen. It's the vegetables that need a plan. So I do find, especially for our family, I try to approach the week with some thoughtfulness to what we should be eating first. So definitely, like those greens, like you said, need to be cooked. Even if I cook them early and then use them later in the week. Things like carrots, we all know those can sit in the back of the fridge for a couple weeks sometimes and be waiting. So part of it is just kind of thinking, even if you don't have a plan, just going in on Monday and being like, okay, what has to get used in here? And we talked about this a little bit, but I think bringing some vegetables home and roasting them right when you get home, if you have the motivation to do it, it makes them so much easier to incorporate. You're more likely to throw them on a plate. I find that I'll even eat vegetables for breakfast if I have some roasted veggies in the fridge, cooked up with a fried egg or
even on a toasted bagel with your egg, make a little sandwich, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So some of it is like doing some of that work ahead of time so that you're just not, by the time you get to dinner when you're fried and you don't want to make a decision, some of that decision is already made for you. And then one thing I included in the book, and that's easy to find resources on online, is proper storage of the vegetables, because most vegetables should not be brought home and left in the bag from the grocery store.
Guilty.
They need, we all are. Last week I found something that I forgot about. So we all do it, but there's definitely room for improvement, and there's ways that you can store those cucumbers. If you wrap them in a paper towel or a dish towel, or with your greens, if you put a paper towel or a dish towel in the bin with the greens and turn it over, moisture is the enemy of a lot of our veggies. So proper storage makes a huge difference. You can extend the life by 2 or 3 days of a lot of those things.
Yeah. And I've tried to set up a little system in the fridge. I think a lot of people already do this with the meat that they buy. When you're putting it into the fridge, if they have different dates, you try to put the one on top that you need to use first, so that when you pull out of the fridge, you're pulling out from the one that needs to be used first. But I realized a lot of the veggies, some of them, when you just buy like the bulk produce, they don't have a label on them or a sell by or use by date. But a lot of the pre-chopped bagged stuff has dates on it. So if you organize it in the fridge, so when I open up my fridge, it's like, this is the section of veggies over here needs to be looked at on a regular basis. Otherwise, you're going to be throwing things out.
I do find in the evening when I go into the kitchen and start putting the leftovers from dinner away, I like to just take a quick survey of the vegetables that are in the crisper drawer. And if I know they need to be used the next day, I'll pull them out and put them on the shelf at eye level, because then the next day that will trigger in your mind to use them. If you are a household that eats meat, you're already in the habit of doing this, because you're right. You're looking to see what the expiration date is on that, and you're paying attention to it. But with vegetables, sometimes if it doesn't have a date on it, then we just lose track of it. So it is just a slight mind shift.
Hey, you. I wanted to press pause on this episode for a second to talk about your fitness goals. Those sweet dreams of being more active and feeling athletic and confident and doing epic, adventurous shit. Or maybe you just feel like you're getting older, because we're all getting older. And you, like me, never want to give up on carrying all the groceries into the house in one shot, or picking up that heavy Amazon box without worrying that you're going to throw your back out. I know you're busy. You're probably listening to this episode while multitasking. Oh yeah, I'm on to you. And the biggest thing that's stopping you from getting strong and fit is knowing how to use your workout time most effectively. Like exactly which exercises are worth your time, when to do them, and the number of sets and reps to get to your goals. You probably also tried other fitness apps and programs out there, only to feel like they weren't right for your needs. You want a program that has it all: strength, power, cardio, mobility, and recovery, all built right in without spending your whole life in the gym. And you want experienced coaches around to answer your questions, and a community at your back to help you stay motivated and inspired. Look, I've been coaching women for a long time now, And the truth is that you don't need another fad diet or complicated, time-consuming workout routine to support you as you age. You just need to train smarter with simple, progressive workouts and a plan that's designed for your body and your life, whether you're navigating motherhood, midlife, or menopause. And if this sounds like exactly what you've been missing, I invite you to join Stronger 365, a progressive strength, power, and conditioning training membership for women like you who are ready to stop winging it and take their training to the next level with more structure and support. And the best part? This program has 3 different options, so you can choose your own fitness adventure based on your goals, how much time you have to train, and what equipment you have, whether you've got access to a full gym or, like me, work out at home. And it's run by me, Alison, and my awesome team at Miles to Go Athletics. Head over to the show notes for all the details and to join our membership community. And as an FBG, your first 2 weeks are on me. And now, let's get back to the episode. So, what do people need to know to make veggies more appealing on their plates? For those people like me who grew up in a house where veggies were not always well cooked and they were often really bland and boring and by themselves, what tips do you have?
I think number one, if you have a cooking method that you like, stick with it. So, again, to just keep things simple, if you like your vegetables roasted, roast them. If you like them sauteed, saute them. The air fryer is, of course, fantastic for vegetables. So if there's a cooking method that you like, stick with it, because the variation can come in what you pair them with, how you season them, what sauces you use. There's so many different ways that you can do bowls, tacos. All those vegetables can go into different sandwiches, melts, eggs. So I think finding the vegetables you like, trying some new things from time to time, but then sticking with a cooking method that works for you. I prefer roasted vegetables over almost anything else. It's easy and it's hands off. And so that is my go-to. So I think that really is the key. Find the thing that works for you and stick with it. Don't feel like you have to constantly be mixing things up.
Yeah, I do really like roasting, particularly because just like with batch cooking, proteins for the week. If I can just put it on a pan and walk away from it for 30 minutes, I'm more likely to do it than if I need to fuss over it in some other way. So yeah, I agree. I think finding what works for your lifestyle and for your preferences for the different types of veggies. But I'm a huge fan of like just taking a bunch of veggies, onions, zucchini, broccoli, cauliflower, and Brussels sprout, and just chop everything up and throw it on a pan and mist it with some oil. And then I would just cook it. And that was it. Yeah. And then the sauces. When I think of sauces on veggies, I'm going to be honest with you, I think a lot about like the Velveeta or like ranch dressing or things like this, right? But it doesn't have to be that you use the sauce to drown out the flavor or the horrible texture of the veggies that you're eating. And those are really shelf stable. They stay in the cabinet for months. And then you just rip it off and pour it in with the veggies or pour it over like the last minute or two while it's roasting in the oven to coat it and thicken it. And it just makes all the difference in the world.
Exactly. Yeah. It can make a really big difference. We want our vegetables to have flavor. I think the association we have with them from childhood, a lot of us, is that they were kind of bland. But it's amazing what even just a squeeze of lemon juice will do for almost every vegetable, some fresh citrus.
Yeah.
And I love too, I think for a lot of people, there's this inclination to cook all of our vegetables, but almost all vegetables can be served raw. And if you like that crunch, there can be a lot of ways to incorporate it. I have a salad in the book that is, I call it broccoli Caesar-ish salad. It's not really a true Caesar salad, but you chop the broccoli florets really small and you keep them raw in the salad. So you get this really nice crunch and the flavor is different. So, trying that too, if you are someone who thinks you might like the texture more if they're uncooked, there's a lot of ways to use.
Yeah, and that's great too, because in the summertime, we don't always feel like having a lot of hot food or standing in the kitchen and making hot foods. So using those raw foods and preserving the texture and that crunch that our food sometimes is missing.
Exactly. Yeah. Sometimes we just need more variety, and feeling like we're craving something different is the answer. So listening to that is great.
Yeah. So looking at ways that people can create simplicity, we have the simple roasting pan, the just throw it all on a roasting pan sort of scenario. And then prepackaged sauces that can mix up the different flavors that you've got. I tend to batch cook my proteins and then just like chop them up and spread them throughout. But you also include in your book some veggie proteins. There's a whole section on plant protein. So tell me a little bit there for people who are maybe looking to incorporate more plant protein into their diet.
Yeah, part of it is just for simplicity. Again, we are a household. I'm a person who eats everything, but I also have found that if I approach my meals by thinking about vegetables first, then there are a ton of things in the pantry that can be transformed into the protein and added to the plate. And my kids love a lot of those proteins, so that works really well in my household too. And some of it is just as simple as I will add, and there's a recipe for it in the book, some spices to chickpeas, roast the chickpeas until they're almost crispy but still tender in the middle. And that goes with almost anything. And it's great for these bowl meals that we were talking about. It's fantastic just served with a sauce and with some roasted vegetables. It was really important to me that I emphasized those options just because it can prevent you from having to run to the store to get meat. These are things that are a lot more shelf stable. They're a lot more budget friendly. A lot of them have beans and lentils and have a ton of fiber, and they're delicious. I wanted to make sure that I had those options in there too, even though this isn't a vegetarian book.
Yeah, protein and its fiber. Two really important things that Americans are not getting enough of in their diet.
Those pouches of like seasoned beans and lentils, that is a go-to. I always have those in the pantry because that is lunch in 5 minutes. That's a super nutritious, super filling, satisfying. That with some vegetables and a fried egg on top or a little bit of toast is fantastic and takes just a few minutes.
I love that you're talking about the packaging part of this too, because there's a lot of self-righteousness in some areas of the nutrition world right now around like not eating foods that are packaged. And I understand like where that's coming from, but there is always going to be this stop for me. If I have to buy the dried beans and dried lentils, there is a 0% chance I'm going to eat them.
Right.
This is the reality of my life. And I could be mad at myself about that, or I could just recognize I have to make this work within the context of my actual life. If it's the difference between you getting enough protein and getting enough fiber and getting enough vegetables into your diet is that they are more processed, do it.
Yes.
Do it, because the barriers for people getting this stuff into their diet are massive right now. We don't need to add additional layers of complexity and obstacles to people getting the foods into their diet that are really good for them.
It's something that I've really made sure that, especially on Instagram, when I'm sharing stories and in my writing and in my emails, to emphasize the fact that I use those ingredients too. If that is the barrier, if you feel like you have to make everything from scratch and start from raw beans and cook everything from scratch and cook your own bread and that's preventing you from eating in a way that makes you feel good, stop. You do not need to do that.
Yeah, and a lot of people that are preaching this are people that they're full-time content creators. And so they're making their own almond milk. Cool. I have a full-time job that doesn't require me to make my own almond milk. So I'm going to buy it at the store, right?
Yeah.
I think, there's a little bit of this mismatch of our expectations versus the reality of our lives. And I've seen way too many people as a nutrition coach not doing these things because they've self-created barriers to them. You are creating rules that you're just making up. The research does not say that you get less nutrition from your food if it is in a package or if it is frozen. These are purely made up, and they are becoming very real barriers to people eating the types of things that they need to eat. So I do love that in your book you mentioned, feel free to take the shortcuts. If that's the difference between you eating more vegetables is that you're using jarred spaghetti sauce versus making your own, it's okay.
Yeah, we all have too much. We have so much. We're busy. We're busy. And jarred spaghetti sauce should not be the reason that you're not having a yummy, nutritious dinner, So yeah, I agree. I love that you take that approach.
Yeah. Yeah. So meal planning, we have really busy families right now. Everybody is overbooked, overscheduled. And it becomes really difficult for them to have a plan for what they're going to eat throughout the week. Your book is full of it, so you don't have to tell me everything because people can and should check the book out if you're interested in getting more veggies into your life. But what are some of the tips that you have for meal planning for busy families? How do you set yourself up for success the moment you go into the grocery store?
One of the best keys, and I think it works for people who are planners and people who are not, is to think about a few things that you can cook once and eat twice. And so for me, I never make rice without making a double batch because I know there's so many ways that I can use it later in the week. You mentioned this about proteins. If I'm going to grill chicken or roast chicken, I'm going to make enough for 2 nights because I know I can chop it up and serve it a different way. So a lot of it is just about making the best use of your time in the kitchen. And especially with sauces, I am a sauce girl. I like sauce on everything. And so if I'm making a sauce or a vinaigrette from scratch, which is extra work, I'm going to make enough to have it 2 nights. And I know we'll use it in some other iteration later. So that's the biggest thing. Everybody has a different approach. Some people love freezer meals. Some people don't. Some people want to plan for the week. Some people don't. But cooking once and having 2 uses for those things, I think is the best way that we can all make best use of our time.
Yeah. And in your book, the footnote on a lot of the recipes is ways to double it up and use it with other recipes in the book. So if you're making the gochujang sauce, like where else it gets paired with, and then the way that you've even set up the book. So you can be like, okay, I'm going to pick 2 main veggies this week.
Yep.
Let's say carrots and corn. And I'm going to go in there and I'm going to find some overlap. And then you also have at the end meal plans. And this is so clever. I don't know if other people are doing this, but I'm just going to attribute it to you and your infinite wisdom. But the meal plans at the end, you have them blocked out. Hold on, I'm just flipping to the page. So you have a meal plan for a busy week, for a spring fling, summer living, sweater weather. So they're themed in here, but you have little QR codes for the shopping list.
Yes. I'm so glad you noticed that. That was another thing that I pushed for from the very beginning. I was like, I want people to just be able to scan this and then it'll take you right to a printable shopping list. So if you want to make those meals, and I've thought about what meals go together to address some of these things that we talked about. So doubling up on sauces and just to make your life easy.
And what's so cool about that is that helps people to create, even if they get tired of the meal plans that you have in there or they're not for them, it shows you how simple it can be to create a system around your week. So maybe some weeks you have more bandwidth and you can prepare or you can give it thought. But I think always having a plan B, if you are a busy family and you know there are going to come weeks where you are going grocery shopping without having given any thought to what you're going to be eating for the next week because you haven't had time to do that, then have a plan B. For me, I have a system. I grab the greens, I grab the starchy, I grab the whole grains, I grab the protein. And like I can mix and match them in any different ways. Having those kinds of systems, like these meal plans with the pre-prepared grocery list, is like on those weeks that inevitably happen where you got no bandwidth to think about what's for meals next week, you have something that's right there that has already done the work for you.
Yep. Yeah. I think that's the key. We need to just embrace those weeks where we know we're going to be busy and we aren't going to want to think of something new and we aren't going to want to make something complicated and just embrace that.
Yeah. Incorporate the obstacle into the planning, not
Absolutely
planning for there to be no obstacle.
Yes. I love
not
that.
happening.
Yes. I love it.
All right. This is the $1 million question I have been waiting to ask you. Tell me which recipes in the book are your favorite.
It, of course, is really hard to choose.
Yeah. There's a lot. Like for those of you who have not looked at this book yet, you are listening, you should. But everything's in here. There's pasta, there's orzo, there's salads, there's pizza, there's sandwiches, there's, oh my goodness, there's just.
Yeah. When I started planning for this book, I had over 300 recipes that I had just brain dumped over the years when I was starting to kind of think about how this might look. And so then when I went back, I wanted to make sure that for each chapter, there was like a variety of options of ways to cook it. Most of the chapters have a way to use that vegetable in a soup and a way to use that vegetable in a salad and a way to make it with something bready. So it really got at the way that I approach meals. Sometimes we're craving pasta, sometimes we're craving salad. We just want to approach it that way. I have to say, the recipe that's on the cover, sweet potatoes are a go-to for me. And this recipe on the cover is one of my favorites. And again, in our household, we iterate on it all the time, but it is a sheet pan and you're roasting the sweet potatoes, the broccoli, and the chicken all together at the same time, and then compiling them into a meal. And I just find that to be, using this method, I find it to be something that I go back to again and again and again.
Yeah. 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 That does look good. And anything that, as I told you, anything that I can do on one pan and walk away from it for a while or do really quickly inside of a saute pan. And this book is just so full of all of that.
It's just about finding something that is appealing and delicious for you. And if you're feeding small people or other people in your household, finding something that works for all of you and keeps your life simple, but enjoyable too.
And I think just kind of the reminder to throw out the rules that don't work for you.
Yes.
You don't need to buy the dried beans. You could buy the canned beans or the ones that are already cooked and they're in a pouch, and just getting creative and being open to, it doesn't need to look a certain way. Spend some time in the produce aisle, spend some time wandering the plant-based protein section, spend some time in the frozen section, see what's there, see what's available, and be okay with, it doesn't all need to be from scratch all the time.
Absolutely. Yeah. 100%.
Cool. Jess, this is so amazing. Thanks so much for coming on. This was so helpful. I love to talk about people getting more vegetables in their diet. Obviously, people should pick up your cookbook. Start with a vegetable. I have it down here now, but it's been in my kitchen since I received it. And we'll link to that in the show notes so people can find that easily. People can also find you on your website and Instagram, both of which we'll link to in the show notes so people can easily find you. This is so great. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It was so much fun.
And that's a wrap for this week's episode of the Fit Bottom Girls podcast. But don't worry, we're dropping new episodes every Thursday. In the meantime, head over to the show notes for all the links from today's episode, or go to fitbottomedgirls.com/podcast to catch up on past episodes. Thanks for being here. I'll see you next week.